The studio by Jean-Dominique Ieraci, Canadian High Commissioner in Singapore. Hi, Commissioner. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Right. Firstly, I want to get your reaction to the pause on tariffs. Do you see this as a positive sign?
Well, it is a positive sign. You know, when you have such an integrated relationship as we have with the U.S. and with Mexico now, you expect facts to play on their own. And so, you know, we saw the markets take a plunge opening on Monday morning. Americans were starting to worry that the 25% tariffs was going to start to bite. They were receiving bills, electricity bills, telling them that their costs would increase. And so I think all of this played out and common sense prevailed.
Okay, Mr. High Commissioner, it doesn't come cheap to Canada. As we understand it, 10,000 extra officers at the border, $200 million, on extra border control resources. On top of the $1 billion, I understand it's already been spent on border control measures to combat essentially minuscule crossings. And as I understand it as well, 19 kilograms of fentanyl that was seized, at the border last year. I'm just wondering, do you have a sense, the cables would have come in overnight from Ottawa by now. Do you have a sense of how the results are going to be measured by the Trump administration?
So, obviously we actually have a common interest in managing that border. Goods and, legal goods flow every day, but also illegal migration, illegal drugs flow both ways every day. Now, you're right to point out that the flow from Canada to the U.S. was less than 1% of the illegal flows going into the U.S. But nonetheless, we'd rather bring that down to zero. What was announced today was essentially what we had been discussing with the U.S. administration since December, to increase patrolling at the border, $1.3 billion investment. And I think it was a due update to upgrade our presence at the border. And so that's essentially what you're seeing today.
It seems like Mr. Trump is very pleased with the initial steps taken by Canada. He's indicated satisfaction. Do you think this shows the efficacy of tariffs as a tool for diplomacy? Would it embolden Mr. Trump to continue to wield them as, threats?
Well, I cannot speak for the President of the United States, of course, but the way we saw it is we looked at those threats and we looked at ourselves and thought, well, wait a minute, we are the United States' biggest client. Of course, they're our largest export market, but we are their biggest clients. We are the top market for 36 of 50 Canadian states. We import more from the U.S. than they sell to China, Japan, the UK, and Germany combined. So, well, wait a minute. Like this appeared initially to be a negotiation about fentanyl and migration, and we realized, no, maybe there was a bit more to this, using tariffs to establish a position of power. Well, we wanted to make it very clear to our friends in the United States that we were going to retaliate with tariffs if that were the case, and show the importance of Canada and showcase and highlight how integrated our supply chains are and how well we've been doing for the last 30 years as an integrated market, making the most prosperous region in the world. And I think that's at the end of the day what.
Okay, very interesting that you mentioned that you kind of viewed yourself as business partners, and the United States, is a huge customer. I do want to ask you about the other point that comes up from time to time, and I'm sure you're looking into it as well, is this whole issue of reducing your dependence on U.S. trade to build, global trade alliances. So that really kind of falls on you because you're here in Asia. Can you tell us what's been done and what are you going to do?
Yes, well, diversifying trade is good. It's good for our personal portfolio. It is good, obviously, for countries. So Canada launched the Indo-Pacific strategy a couple of years ago, and it's not only trade related, but of course it creates security links, people-to-people links, links that I guess needed certainly improvement. On the trade side, what we're doing is we're investing in these relationships. We've established a lot more of a presence in Asia. We have embassies in every country in Southeast Asia, for example. And my team's role is to find new markets for Canadian products. We have a great relationship with Singapore. Singapore believes in free trade, and so part of my difficulty is I have no irritants to discuss when I meet with Singaporean ministers. But we do also attract investment from Singapore.
But I want to be real at the same time. I mean, there are limits to what you can do, and that relationship with the U.S. between the U.S. and Canada is something that's not really going to change in the sense that, you have such close ties and you're so connected in so many ways, not just economically, you have culturally, and obviously their family ties as well.
That's right. I mean, there's several 100,000 people who cross the border every day. Where I live, I cannot walk over the border. There's a border, but it is within 20 minutes drive of my house. Now, you do not change geography. At the end of the day, trade is very influenced by the geography. And this is why the decision has been since 1964, when we signed our first trade pact with the US, the decision has been since then to go for more and more integrated chains. Because you're right, I mean, diversification is one thing, but I don't think anybody in Canada says that we'll move away from the US. It's the US plus, it's not instead of.
And High Commissioner, amid tariff dispute, Mr. Trump has doubled down on floating Canada as the 51st state. How concerned is your government about that statement? I mean, how serious do you think Mr. Trump is?
No, I mean, we're not going to become the 51st state. We've also proposed that they could become our 11th province, but I think for the moment we're just taking it in stride.
Okay, I want to ask you about what's been happening in the diplomatic community. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you've been talking to some of your counterparts here in the region as well, and they would be wanting to talk to you because you're feeling it firsthand. What's been happening, and they could be in line next for tariff threats as well. What are they saying to you, and what are you telling them in turn about how you're responding and dealing with this situation?
Now that's a very good question. I mean, obviously this is a very fast-moving series of news and developments, so it's tough to keep up to date. I think what my colleagues generally ask me about is they ask me a question about what's actually going on. So it tends to be factual questions. Here, whether it's myself or my colleagues, we don't have a direct role in negotiating with the U.S. So I think it's more out of curiosity than anything. What is it? Where is it going? But otherwise, we're reading the same news or listening to the same news.
So really, they don't ask you for advice on how Canada has dealt with it? How to make sure the phone call goes well, the all-important phone call?
Those tend to be the over beers conversation, previous experience and how you deal with issues. Yep. But obviously, I'm very happy to detail what has happened, what I know about here. And you're right. I mean, we do get those cables, as we say in English, and so I do have a lot more information than what you just read casually on.
Right. Okay. And as far as the Canadian community here, businesses which are here as well, I'm sure you're in contact with them as well. What are they saying to you?
Well, they are. I mean, they're sharing their frustration. That I think, like most Canadians, the surprise that we would be somehow singled out with a few of our friends, and so there is a lot of emotion out there that is expressed by Canadians. But Canadians tend to be pretty nice people and pretty level-headed. So those questions are questions as to where can I buy Canadian products. You can feel a bit of patriotism coming out of this. I think this has united us as much as almost anything in our history. So we'll take the positives.
Yeah, sure. I mean, speaking from your position in the region, how do you see the potential trade wars with U.S., Canada, with China, potentially the EU? How do you see it affecting Asia and Southeast Asia in the near term?
Well, that's a bit of a crystal ball.
What worries you the most?
Three-dimensional chess. I think when I'm here and I speak with Singaporeans, I can see that there's a worry that countries can be caught in a crossfire if there is any sort of tariffs or non-tariff measures taken by the U.S. or China principally against one another, and then that countries in the region that are fully integrated in the supply chain, a bit like us with the U.S., suddenly get caught by this.
Okay.
And of course, like for us, it also means trying to keep abreast of what it means if these supply chains get disrupted. It might have an impact on Canada as well.
Right. And on that note, I'm wondering if a strategy for the region would include forming alliances that don't necessarily include the United States. Now, this was something that was brought up. I mean, as a consequence potentially, but is this something that you can do, I guess, without consequences, between Washington and Ottawa, given the fact that you're so close and you're immediate neighbors as well?
You mean Canada with countries in the region?
Yeah, Canada with countries in the region without the U.S. I mean, and how do you think Washington might react to Canada doing something like that?
Well, I mean, we already have a very solid free trade agreement called the CPTPP, right? And so, which Canada is a member of, the U.S. is not. At the end of the day, we look after our interests, and our interests generally trade-wise include a large chunk of Asia in general, and of course Southeast Asia in particular. We're negotiating a free trade agreement with ASEAN. We just concluded with Indonesia. So I mean, we're still moving ahead, and yes, we have to make sure that we maintain a good relationship with the U.S., but that doesn't have to be to the detriment of good relationship elsewhere, even with countries that sometimes we disagree with.
And High Commissioner, before we let you go, one question, if we can broaden our conversation to something that's been happening in Asia with Canada. It's been making headlines in recent months. Canada's relationship with India, if I can ask you about that. It has soured dramatically over the assassination of 6 separatists on the Canadian soil. Where do you think Canada and India relations stand right now? And have there been any movement, diplomatic maneuvers that's taken place to move past and improve desired relations?
Well, we still have diplomatic relationships with India. We still have a team in India. I believe both countries would like to move past this event. Obviously, Canada could not just stand idle when another country sponsors assassinations, right? No country would stand idle. So we made our point. We presented the proof. And now we're talking about how do we get forward from this and maintain what was a good relationship before. And right. So, and remains a pretty large business relationship as well.
Okay. Mr. High Commissioner, thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.